The sea does not belong to despots. On its surface, immoral rights can still be claimed. Men can fight each other, devour each other, and carry out all the earth's atrocities. But 30 feet below the surface, their power ceases, their influence fades, their authority disappears. Ah, sir, live, live in the heart of the sea. Independence is possible only here. Here I recognize no master. Here I am free. Today, we are reviewing Nemo's War, 2nd edition. Nemo's War is based on the Jules Verne's book, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, with a little bit of material, the tiniest bit of material, from the mysterious island. While in the book, we only observe Nemo through the eyes of a rather unreliable and deficient narrator. I mean, come on, you pass by his room how many times and you never notice the pictures of his family? Like what? Okay, whatever. But be that as it may, unlike the novel, in the game, you are Nemo. You are driven by science or driven by the need to explore, or you are driven by the desire to crush imperialism wherever you can, or you just want to wage all-out war against the surface. Nobody's judging you. You're free. You're in the sea. Although there's danger involved. Sort of, I guess you could say it's sort of victory point salad, but at the same time, I wouldn't call it that, because salad implies that you have a whole bunch of things thrown together, but here everything is tied together thematically. It all fits into the game thematically, and if anything, this is kind of like how I envision Uwe Rosenberg would be if he took an interest in more wargamey type stuff. Not that this is a war game, strictly speaking, but, well, let me show you the game and then I'll tell you my thoughts afterwards. This is a late prototype copy. Much of the board art, token, and tile art, and card art is established, but there are some final touches missing. Still, the art is impressive and fitting to a board game adaptation of an older novel, and the components will be in much better shape in the published edition. For instance, the board will be mounted instead of thick cardstock. Also, Nemo's submarine, the Nautilus, will be represented by a plastic miniature rather than the Totoro cat bus meeple you see here. Any game of Nemo's War will be driven by 3 primary elements: Nemo's motivation, the adventure deck, and battling ships. It is, after all, Nemo's War. The first element is Nemo's motivation, which affects the scoring for the game: exploration, science, anti-imperialism, or war. You select or randomly choose one of these motivations at the beginning of the game. In Act 3 of the game, you'll be able to change Nemo's motivation, but then it's locked. You place Nemo's motive tile on the scoring meter like so. The meter displays the different scoring categories and how these points are modified by Nemo's motive. Warships, in the case of science, aren't worth more than their value, but sinking trade ships, their value is modified down all the way to 0, but never to negative numbers. Similarly for adventure card values and treasure values. Liberation, science, and wonders are multipliers, and these factors are often the most severe ones in your decisions throughout the game. Liberation stands for how many uprisings you've created, represented by cubes on the map. Science and wonders can be found on some treasures, some ships, and many adventure cards. Notice, for instance, that Nemo's science motivation means that science and wonders are weighed heavily. Every science icon is worth 6 points. You'll be far more invested in scientific discoveries and finding wondrous artifacts and natural phenomena than in sinking ships. Let's look at what happens when we substitute anti-imperialism. Now we see that sinking trade ships is much more valuable per ship, bringing their individual values up to be comparable to sinking warships, which normally yield more points. Treasure doesn't matter as much, so you'll likely be spending them to boost rolls. What kind of rolls? Well, the kinds to incite anti-imperialist uprisings, of course. Wonders in science still count a little bit. Not insignificant, of course, since Nemo is still at his heart a scientist and engineer. But in this case, his heart is caught up with the various struggles on the surface. War and Explore also give vastly different experiences on scoring and gameplay. The second driving element of the game is the adventure deck. In the adventure deck, we find elements of gameplay that are similar to those found in a paragraph game like Z-Man's Tales of the Arabian Nights or Red Raven's Above and Below. There's a descriptive paragraph for flavor text, followed by tests, choices, and consequences. Some cards you end up keeping and using later, if you choose to. Almost every card scores in one category, some in two. Adventure cards can be placed into the failed pile, a red F, or the past pile, a green P. Any cards in the past pile will score in their categories. The failed pile doesn't score. There are over 50 adventure cards available, but at any one time you'll likely only manage to see 1/3 to 1/2 of them, and it varies from game to game. This is because the adventure deck has a 3-act structure, and each act has a limited number of cards in it depending on Nemo's starting motivation. Act 1 comprises of 6 adventure cards. Act 2, which ups the ante, contains a varying number of adventure cards depending on your initial motivation. Act 3, which also has a rising adventure card randomly sorted into the mix, also varies according to your initial motivation. All adventures will end at some point with one of several finale cards, which have all been unlocked in the Kickstarter and will be available in all copies. Reach the finale, and you've won the game, but there's, of course, more to winning than that. I'll note that each act of the deck brings more and more danger, but also more and more choices. With each increasing act, you'll have to place more ships in the ocean, and these ships will also be more likely to be dangerous warships rather than trade ships. Now we get to the third element, battling ships. Whatever your motivation, if you don't balance battling ships with your other endeavors, the oceans will fill with ships, revealed and unrevealed, and the game will end as the Imperial powers hear of your wondrous Nautilus and hunt you down to an ignominious end. On the other hand, if you choose your battles poorly, you'll end up with enough notoriety to bring even more warships down on your head. Mind you, with war and proper preparation, this might be what you want, but too much notoriety will still bring about an early pariah ending to the game. Ships that only have a defense value, in black on the right, are trading ships, sometimes passenger ships. Ships that also have an offense value, in red on the left, are warships. Warships are typically worth more than trading ships when sunk, though you should note Nemo's motivation for the game to determine how they score. Warships are also more dangerous because they attack the Nautilus first. Sinking ships will also raise your notoriety by the number of skulls and crossbones on that ship. Ships can be saved for salvage to pay for upgrades to the Nautilus, or, more often, they can be placed on the tonnage track. The first full column on the tonnage track determines your score for scouring the seas. Your score is in the rightmost column that you've filled entirely with ships. You need to scour the seas in equal measure to score your best, in other words. Let's cover several more elements of the game. The notoriety track is used to both track your notoriety and determine when more warships are added, when they become more powerful, and when your game ends with a pariah ending. Note that different motivations have different pariah ending levels, which also affects your choices in the game. While many tests, in both adventure cards and in battle with warships, depend on rolling 2d6 and getting an amount larger than or equal to a threshold, you can wager different ship resources and use special crew tiles to add DRM or dice roll modifiers to the roll. Ship resources each have their own track. Nemo's mental stability, the fitness and number of the crew, and the fitness of the Nautilus's hull. You can wager one resource by sliding its marker halfway to the right and getting that modifier indicated before the roll, adding it to the roll's final value. Win the roll, and you move your marker back to its original position on the left. Lose the roll, however, and you lose that resource in addition to any other penalties for losing the roll. It's a bit of push your luck that way. Note that spending a resource all the way down to the defeat space will also end the game. Other DRMs and special bonuses can be provided by the special crew tiles. Special crew are one-time use, and you turn them over after using them. Note that using special crew tiles will forfeit their scoring, and some crew tiles have additional negative effects when you use them, such as giving you more notoriety or affecting your mental stability. Nemo is very attached to his crew. The Nautilus itself can be upgraded at the cost of salvaged ships. Ships must be reserved for either salvage, which doesn't score, or tonnage, which does score. But Nautilus upgrades can be highly valuable depending on your motivation, and that's also a vital set of choices you must make. There are over 10 upgrade cards, and you'll see maybe half of those during the game, and install even fewer than that. Now, let's look at gameplay. At the beginning of the game, the Nautilus starts on a random ocean on the map, one of the 6 major oceans determined by a die roll. At the beginning of the game, you can also get a head start on upgrading your Nautilus by paying 3 ship resources for the Nautilus upgrade card relevant to your current motivation. Each major ocean also starts with 1 treasure marker, indicating that there is treasure to be found there on a search action. Turns are broken up into 3 phases: the event phase, where you resolve an adventure card from the deck, the placement phase, where you place ships on the board, and the action phase, where you take player actions. In the event phase, you draw the top card of the deck and execute it, whether it's a keep card, a choice, a test, or something else entirely. Special act cards serve to rack up the tension by speeding up the number of ships you'll have to place in the next phase, as well as increasing the number of warships you're likely to draw. In the placement phase, you roll the number of dice according to the current act and place that number of ships. Usually, the map will fill with ships over the course of the game, and sometimes treasure is added or replenished. Act 1 only rolls 2 white dice, and you'd place ships in the noted oceans. Act 2 adds a black die, and you'd place 3 ships. Act 3 adds another white die, and you'd place 4 ships. Enough notoriety, and you'll add another black die to roll 5 dice and place 5 ships. White dice are used to determine gained action points by taking the difference between any 2 white dice of your choice. In this case, you'd get 4 actions. But white dice have another purpose. If you choose two white dice that are doubles, you cause a lull turn to occur. Lull turns slow down the placement of ships since only the two double dice are used and replenish treasure. There are also negative effects you'll need to balance out, such as the crushing of uprisings that you've created across the oceans. Ships are first placed unrevealed in an empty space. If an ocean is full, unrevealed ships will spill over into adjacent oceans, either along the blue movement line or the dotted placement only line. If the ocean and its adjacent oceans are full, you begin to replace unrevealed ships with ships drawn from the ship draw bag, beginning in the main ocean and then spreading to adjacent oceans. If all ships are revealed in the ocean and its adjacent oceans, white trade ships are flipped to become gray warships. If all white trade ships are flipped in the ocean and its adjacent oceans, you need to place a revealed ship on the map in an empty space. If all spaces on the map are full, either with revealed or hidden ships, you lose the game. As a result, it's very important to consider how you'll control the spread of ships throughout the oceans. At the beginning of the action phase, you mark any action points gained from the placement die roll. The action point track in the upper left tracks actions as you gain and spend them, though you can only save 1 point from turn to turn. You're limited to a maximum of 5 action points at any time. Any more gained are lost. Now, let's take a look at the kinds of actions that you can take. The typical actions and their costs are noted directly on the board. Some actions cost less on a lull turn, so it's useful to save an action point to the next turn until you really need it. The success or failure of most of these actions is determined by rolling 2d6 and referring to the success table on the board, but you'll often modify this roll by wagering ship resources, spending treasure tokens, having specific Nautilus upgrades, being in an ocean with revealed ships or warships, and so on. A hint: if you don't care as much about treasure, use it to incite rebellions or beef up the Nautilus. Search can yield 1 or 2 treasure tokens if your sea has a treasure marker on it. You remove treasure markers when you gain treasure, thus lull turns are useful to replenish them. Treasure tokens that are treasure can be used to boost some dice rolls, as well as being scoring fodder for the end of the game. Treasure tokens that are wonders are purely scoring fodder. Rest and repair will raise your crew and hull respectively on success, sometimes even by 2 levels. Refit allows you to upgrade the Nautilus at the cost of salvaged ships. A really good success will give you a bit of a discount. Incite allows you to add uprising cubes to the map, as well as reducing your notoriety, vital for not reaching pariah levels of losing the game. But remember that lull turns can crush your rebellions unless you pay for them in notoriety. To adventure, you draw from the extra adventure deck on the right of the board, not the main deck, and resolve the adventure card. You also get a treasure for each treasure marker on top of the extra adventure deck. You can spend an action to move along the blue movement lines. And of course, they're spending an action point to attack ships in the sea, either with a bold attack, which you can attack more than one ship with, as long as your attacks keep succeeding and at the cost of notoriety, or with a stalk attack, which allows you to reveal a ship and then choose whether or not to attack it, and gives you +1 DRM if you do choose to attack it. Wow, that was a lot of detail. But as you'll notice, when I was going through how the actual game turn plays, the turns are very simple. You draw a card, you roll to place the ships, and then you take your actions. But it is the choices that you have to make, the decisions that you need to make that really give the game its heart. One thing that I'll note is that some people may be put off by the whole idea of you roll a bunch of dice a lot. Like every turn you'll be rolling dice at least twice, probably. Unless you really, really didn't plan ahead for that little turn that just happened. But there are so many ways in this game to mitigate the dice. I mean, you almost always are able to mitigate the dice using a ship resource, whether you're using Nemo's mental stability, or the crew, or the ship's hull. You've got dice roll modifiers that can be given on a one-time basis by the special crew. You've got special Nautilus upgrades that you can get. And there are cards that, like, I love this card. Do no harm. It features 3 cannonballs that you use to add 2 DRM to attacks. So yeah, do no harm. The awesome card. But so there are lots of ways to modify dice rolls in this game. And because there are this many dice rolls, any bad luck kind of evens out. I can't really say I've had a game, and I've played this 4 times now, not counting the 5th time I was playing it to get scenes in for the review. And I really enjoy it, and I have not... usually when something bad happens to me, I can look back and say, I should not have wagered Nemo's stability doing that. That was a bad idea. Because, you know, stability for Nemo is difficult to come by sometimes. So it's at every step, it's a matter of a lot of wagering your resources and trying to make calculated risks. This game is all about calculated risk. And I think that makes it stand out from a lot of Euros, and even a lot of Ameritrash games, because there's so much mitigation. There's more mitigation in this game than there is in your typical Arkham Horror style game. I know people will argue about that, but there really is a lot more manipulation available in Nemo's War. And then there are Euro games where there's not much in the way of randomization at all, and it's sort of like you draw your tiles or whatever, so you have a little randomization there, but it's not like this constant knife edge of trying to determine what is always the best choice. And to me, that is very fitting because the sea is a very capricious place. It's not forgiving at all. It is wondrous and beautiful, and you will encounter wonder and beauty in this game, and even score on it. But the sea is not a nice place, especially when all the Imperial powers start noticing that, hey, something keeps sinking the ships. Yeah, so they notice, and there are cards that will basically sort of ding you for getting too much notoriety for some reason. So managing your notoriety is something that you need to do and you need to pay attention to, but at the same time, if you play it too safe, you're not going to score very well. Like, I've been able to win this game half of the time, but win is sort of kind of lousy way to put it because I achieve like less than 100 points. I didn't really do anything. I didn't really achieve very much. I saw some wonders. Yeah, I got some adventure in, but I didn't get to the heights of adventure. I didn't see the world, and I didn't scour the seas. So it is a matter of trying to achieve a really good score, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but this is a beat your score game that actually feels exciting because you can lose and not score. Um, I think though that may actually be the key to making a beat your own score game that isn't lacking tension. Because Nemo's War is all about tension. It's all about, oh, look at that. Nemo's erratic. He's like one step away from, we better do something about that, or not do things about that. There's just so many choices. And as I said, the turns are simple, the decisions are intricate, and the way the game all fits together is just beautiful. It's thematic. Everything makes sense in terms of the theme. I'm very hard pressed to think of a more thematic game, actually. I think this is on a par on theme with viticulture. That is probably one of the reasons why I like this game so much. And I just, oh, and as for theme and being based on a book, I have been reading the book. Um, I believe the Oxford edition, which I've found it online for free. It's linked off of Wikipedia, of course. And it is a less trite reading than some of the other translations that I've come across. I don't know what's up with some translators. Honestly, they give a lot less gravitas to Nemo, whereas the Oxford edition makes him that much better, as he really comes across as far more articulate and powerful in speech. But anyways, that's a review of some of the translations. But but yeah, as going back to the game is thematically on course. Things that happen in the game, if you've read the book, you'll say, oh, that happened in the book too, and now I'm experiencing it. I love the nuanced endings. So for instance, so you've got different endings for the different motivations, right? But you have different levels of the endings. Like there are, I think, five different levels of endings for each of the motivations. And they're all thematic, and it makes it much more like a paragraph game. Anyways, wonderful game, very thematic, lots of moving pieces, and yet it's not fiddly, it's not annoying, it's highly thematic, everything is smoothly working together, and even though you're rolling a lot of dice, by gods, you have so many ways to mitigate everything that comes at you. And I highly recommend it. This is a keeper for sure. 2 thumbs up.